You've noticed it, haven't you? The strange way a room shifts when you walk in, the way certain people go quiet, the way compliments land like questions and questions land like accusations. It's not always obvious and it's not always loud, but it's consistent enough that you've started rehearsing yourself before you speak, editing your joy, shrinking your honesty, trying to look normal so you won't trigger whatever it is. And yet, even when you stay silent, you can feel eyes on you. Not because you're trying to be seen, but because something on your life is impossible to ignore. The hardest part is that the attention doesn't feel like admiration. It feels like surveillance, like your mistakes would be celebrated, your growth would be resented, and your peace would be questioned. If this is your season, you're not imagining it, and you're not paranoid. You're waking up to a reality that most people only understand after they've been wounded by it. Visibility can arrive before elevation, and being watched can happen long before you feel ready to be known. Here's the scene that makes it even more confusing. You're not chasing a platform. You're just trying to survive the week, pay what needs paying, keep your faith from collapsing, and still be kind when you're tired. But somehow your life has become a point of interest. The message you didn't respond to becomes a story. The boundary you set becomes a scandal. The small decision to step back becomes a rumor that you think you're better. And it's exhausting because you're already carrying private battles no one sees, sleepless nights, a mind that won't stop scanning for danger, prayers you can barely finish, tears you wipe before anyone enters the room. You've been asking God quietly why you can't just be left alone, why it feels like you're being studied when you didn't volunteer for an audience. And in the middle of that exhaustion, you sense something deeper than social dynamics. It's the feeling that your life is being weighed, tested, sifted. Like there's a spiritual interest in whether you'll bend, whether you'll break, whether you'll compromise just to get people off your back. Most people will interpret this season the wrong way, including you on your hardest days. You'll think the problem is your personality or your tone or your past. You'll assume you attracted the attention because you did something wrong or because you're not doing enough. You'll start trying to earn safety by becoming more agreeable, more impressive, more invisible, more useful, and the enemy loves that kind of confusion because it turns your calling into performance. But there's another explanation that's both sobering and strangely comforting. When God is forming someone for a specific assignment, there's often a period where you become visible to the wrong eyes before you're recognized by the right ones. It happened to Joseph in the house before the palace. It happened to David in the field before the throne. Not because God was careless, but because the preparation is not only about what you can do, it's about who you become when you're misunderstood. Being watched is not always a sign that you're in danger. Sometimes it's a sign that your life carries weight, and weight attracts attention. There's a false interpretation that will try to hook into your wounds, that all eyes are on you because you're special in the way ego wants to be special. And if you feed that thought, it will poison you. You'll become defensive, suspicious, harsh. You'll start seeing enemies everywhere, and you'll isolate out of pride instead of wisdom. But the kind of chosen God forms is not a title for your identity. It's a responsibility for your obedience. Being set apart doesn't mean you're better than others. It means you're being held to a different standard in private long before anyone claps in public. It means God won't let you get away with what others can get away with, because He intends to entrust you with something that would collapse under a divided heart. If this hits home, if you felt the pressure of being watched and misunderstood in a season you didn't ask for, go ahead and like the video, not as a favor to me, but as a quiet way of saying, God, I'm listening, and I want to stay awake. Now, let's name what's really happening underneath the surface. There is a spiritual mechanism at work that doesn't always announce itself. When God marks someone for purpose, the spirit of accusation gets curious. It doesn't have to possess people to use them. It just has to agitate their insecurity and stir their assumptions. That's why you've been dealing with strange misreadings of your intentions. That's why your silence gets interpreted as arrogance. Your kindness gets interpreted as manipulation. Your growth gets interpreted as judgment. The enemy is not omniscient, but it watches patterns. It watches what makes you hesitate. It watches where you're tender It watches which relationships you depend on for validation, and it tries to pressure you into abandoning the slow work of God for the fast relief of pleasing people. This is spiritual warfare that feels like social stress. The battlefield is not your reputation, it's your inner alignment. And if you can hold your posture in this season, humble, steady, discerning, you'll realize the eyes that matter most aren't the ones scanning for flaws. The one watching is the Lord, and his gaze is not predatory, it's protective, it's precise. That's why isolation has intensified, even when you didn't choose it. It's not always punishment. Sometimes it's divine protection. God will reduce your circle not because he wants you lonely, but because he wants you undistracted. Certain relationships can't survive the version of you that obeys without needing permission. Some people only knew how to relate to the you who overexplained, overgave, and underprotected your own heart. When you stop performing for acceptance, you expose the contracts that were never covenant. And that's where betrayal often shows up. Not because you provoked it, but because your boundaries reveal motives. Judas didn't betray Jesus because Jesus changed. Judas betrayed Jesus because his expectations collided with God's plan. In your life, a similar collision is happening. Someone wanted access to you without honoring what's on you. Someone wanted your light without your Lord. Someone wanted proximity without responsibility. And now you're seeing clearly, even though clarity hurts. The warfare isn't just out there, it's in the temptation to harden your heart and call it discernment. Real discernment stays tender to God while it becomes firm with people. Let me bring this into an everyday scene because this isn't abstract. Imagine you're at work or in a family gathering or even in a group chat. You share something small, maybe a new habit, a decision to rest, a boundary about your time. And suddenly the temperature changes. A joke lands that isn't really a joke. A comment gets made that feels like a test. Somebody says, "Must be nice," with a smile that doesn't reach their eyes. Or you notice a friend who used to celebrate you now competes with you in subtle ways, like they're trying to prove your growth isn't real. And you feel that old urge rise up. Explain yourself, defend yourself, prove you're good, prove you're safe, prove you're not who they're making you out to be. But hidden preparation looks like refusing that urge. It looks like letting God be your vindicator while you keep your character intact. It looks like not taking every bait, not replying to every accusation, not trying to manage every perception. And this is where obedience becomes practical. You choose peace over being understood because you trust that God can speak for you in time. Here's the counterexample that will keep you grounded. Not every watchful eye is evil, and not every uncomfortable moment is warfare. Sometimes people are watching because they're hungry for hope and they don't know how to say it. Sometimes they're studying your consistency because they've never seen someone keep showing up with quiet faith. Sometimes the awkwardness you feel is simply the friction of change, yours and theirs, rubbing against old roles. If you call everyone a threat, you'll become brittle, and brittle people confuse hardness with strength. God is not making you suspicious, he's making you discerning. Discernment doesn't mean you assume the worst, it means you ask God for wisdom and you watch the fruit over time. A person may question you today and still become a safe companion tomorrow if their heart is teachable. Another person may praise you loudly and still undermine you privately if their heart is hungry for control. The goal isn't to label people. The goal is to stay aligned with God so you don't react from wounds. Because reactions give the enemy data, responses give God room. Patience in this season is not passive, it's warfare. It's standing still when your flesh wants to sprint. It's waiting when anxiety demands immediate answers. God's timing will offend the part of you that wants quick relief. You want the misunderstanding to clear up now. You want the betrayal to be exposed now. You want the door to open now. But God is not only orchestrating outcomes, he is developing you into someone who can sustain them. He will let you be hidden long enough to remove the need to be seen. He will let you be questioned long enough to remove the need to be validated. He will let you sit in silence long enough to remove the addiction to noise. This is where many people fail the chosen process. They rush into visibility with an unhealed heart, and the same attention they craved becomes the fire that consumes them. God is saving you from that. If the season feels slow, it might be because he's building depth, not drama. And I want to ask you something that will make this personal. Somewhere in your journey, there was a moment you knew God was calling you deeper. Maybe it was after a loss, after a disappointment, after a prayer that felt unanswered, after a breakthrough that didn't look like one at first. You didn't become perfect, you just became awake. If you're willing, leave a comment answering this one question. What was the moment you realized God was separating you for himself? Your answer doesn't have to be polished. Sometimes, naming the moment is part of healing, and it might be the exact confirmation someone else needs to keep going. So, here's the quiet, heavy truth that brings it all together. Yes, all eyes may feel like they're on you, but the most consequential gaze is not human. The one watching will shock you, not because he's waiting to punish you, but because his attention has been on you in ways you didn't recognize. He watched you stay soft when you had every reason to turn cold. He watched you choose integrity when compromise would have been easier. He watched you pray when you felt nothing, forgive when you still hurt, and keep walking when you wanted to disappear. And when God watches, it is not to gather evidence against you. It is to guard what he planted in you. The enemy watches to accuse, people watch to compare, but God watches to cover. This is why you can endure being misunderstood without becoming bitter. This is why you can survive betrayal without turning into betrayal. This is why you can accept isolation without believing you've been abandoned. The season will not last forever, but it will leave a mark on you. The kind that doesn't crave applause. The kind that doesn't fear scrutiny. The kind that belongs to God even when no one claps.